Hi, my name is John Fortner, and this is Lab 5, the Human Rocket. This lab explores the motion of skydiver Felix Baumgartner, who achieved a speed of Mach 1.25 in freefall, which is 1.25 times the speed of sound. And this lab relies on Newton's second law, the momentum principle, which states that the acceleration of an object is proportional to the net force exerted upon that object. And using this principle, the goal of the lab is to create an appropriate model of the drag force exerted upon Baumgartner throughout his freefall. So Baumgartner began his freefall at an altitude of 38,969 meters and achieved a maximum velocity of Mach 1.25 or 428.75 meters per second. And while most models of drag force can be simplified to a force proportional to either the velocity or the square of the velocity, as was done in Lab 2, this model doesn't predict Baumgartner's velocity throughout the fall. So in this lab we had to create a much more complex model based on different variables that impacted his motion. So the reason a simpler model of drag force wouldn't work in this situation is that a simpler model of drag force would predict an increase that gradually decreases in magnitude and eventually reaches a constant terminal velocity. But in this case, Baumgartner's velocity increased in magnitude initially and then gradually decreased in magnitude throughout his fall. And this is likely due to the influence or the change in the density of air throughout his free fall. So now for the actual model of drag force that I used, I still had a value b multiplied by the square of the velocity, except in this case the b value after each loop is also updated along with the velocity in position. So after each loop, the b value is multiplied in this first loop by a drag multiplier, and then the drag multiplier is also updated by having a constant value subtracted from it. So the effect that this has on the b value is sort of a logistic curve that increases exponentially and then starts to level off over time. So after the b value reaches a certain point, which is near where the derivative of the b curve would become 0, the model changes to a new loop. And in this loop, instead of b being multiplied by a multiplier after each loop, it increases linearly by a different constant, which I call drag adder. So after this initial exponential growth that starts to level off, it changes into a linear increase until time equals 260 when the parachute is deployed and b becomes a constant. So here we have the comparison of the two velocity plots, and it's worth noting that this black one here is the velocity plot for the actual motion of Baumgartner, and it is actually a graph of speed, which is why it's sort of inverted, and also it's stretched out more. But as you can see, they follow each other pretty closely, and this is also where the parachute is deployed in each model. And what we see in the model is consistent with this plot, where we have this exponential decrease in velocity, followed by an increase in the drag force substantial enough to reverse the direction of the change in velocity. Increasing the velocity, or changing the velocity in the positive direction all the way to here, and then here at about time 150 is where the model switches to a more linear motion, which is also somewhat more consistent with the model, and eventually reaching a velocity of about 56.6, which is when at time 260, which is when the parachute is deployed. So the reason that an increasing b value is appropriate in this situation to describe Baumgartner's motion is most likely because of the increase in the density of air throughout his descent. So as the density of air increases, there's more drag opposing Baumgartner's motion, which causes his velocity not only to level off at a terminal velocity, but actually to decrease below its maximum. A simpler model of drag force works in most situations because the extent of the descent for most objects is much less, so the change in the density of the air through the different altitudes is negligible. But in this situation, because Baumgartner started from such a high position above the surface of the Earth, that change in density of air impacts his motion very significantly. And this is Lab 5. Thank you for watching.